Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning to all. We are from group 4. There are 5 of us. The first one is Ahmad Ismail bin Rajaluddin. The second one is Luqmanul Hakim bin Norazman. The third one is Zainal Ariff bin Zainal Izzuddin. The fourth one is Muhammad Aqif Aiman bin Muhammad Shahriman, which is me. And the last one is Aliff Haqeemy bin Fairul Azaad. And today we are going to present you about inflation. First of all, do you know what is inflation? Inflation is one of the problems in economy. Inflation frequently associated with increasing in price of goods and services by the period. Inflation is also an increase in the price of goods and services that is representative of the economy. For example, all price of the goods and services increased in Malaysia in 1997 at one time. Next.
The first part of concepts of inflation is deflation. Deflation is a general decline in prices for goods and services, typically associated with a contraction in the supply of money and credit in the economy. During deflation, the purchasing power of currency rises over time. A recent example of deflation occurred during the Great Recession of 2007 until 2008, where the inflation rate fell below 0%. Taken out of context, this might sound like a good thing for consumers, but lower prices are a reflection of lower demand, which arises because of lower demand becomes lower revenues, which leads to layoffs and less income for consumers. Right, next.
Alright, moving on to open inflation. Inflation is said to be open when the government and the monetary authorities of a country do not take any measure to control the spending of the people. The people spend their money freely. As a result, there occurs a sharp rise in demand and prices. If the people are allowed to spend their larger incomes on goods freely, prices will be continued to rise sharply. That's all for open inflation.
Okay, next we move to disinflation. Disinflation is a temporary slowing of the pace of price inflation and is used to describe instances when the inflation rate has reduced marginally over the short term. Disinflation is commonly used by the Federal Reserve to describe a period of slowing inflation and should be not confused with the deflation, which can be harmful to the economy. Unlike inflation and deflation, which refer to the direction of prices, disinflation refers to the rate of change in the rate of inflation. There are several reasons can cause an economy to experience disinflation. If a central bank decides to impose a tighter monetary policy and the government starts to sell off some of its securities, it could reduce the supply of money in the economy, causing a disinflationary effect. Similarly, a contraction in the business cycle or a recession also cause disinflation. For example, business may choose not to increase prices to gain greater market share, leading to disinflation. Next one is hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is a term to describe rapid, excessive, and out of control general price increases in an economy. While inflation is a measure of the pace of rising prices for goods and services, hyperinflation is rapidly rising inflation, typically measuring more than 50% per month. Although hyperinflation is a rare event for developed economies, it has occurred many times throughout history in countries such as China, Germany, Russia, Hungary, and Argentina. Okay, that's all for disinflation and hyperinflation.
Okay, for the headline inflation. For headline inflation is a total inflation is in an economy, including commodities such as food and energy prices like oil and gas, which tend to be much more volatile and prone to inflationary spike. Other than that, headline not present an accurate picture of economic inflation trends since sector-specific inflationary spike are unlikely to persist. That's all for headline inflation.
Okay, the last one for concept of inflation. An inflationary gap is a macroeconomic concept that measures the differences between the current level of real gross domestic product or GDP and the GDP that would exist if an economy was operating at full employment. Inflationary gap happens when demand for goods and services is greater than production due to factors such as higher level of overall employment, increased trade activities, and increased government expenditure. Next, inflation is a serious problem in economy. It caused by failure of aggregate supply to equal the increase in aggregate demand. Basically, inflation is an increase in the price level of goods and services over a period of time. Inflation can be controlled by increased supply of goods and services and reduced money supply in order to control aggregate demand. There are three main ways which inflation can be controlled, which are monetary policy, fiscal policy, and direct or physical control. Firstly, inflation can be controlled by fiscal policy. It involves the government spending and tax in order to influence the level of aggregate demand. A decreased government spending and taxes will produce a surplus budget. It is important which it can reduce the inflationary on an economy. By decreased government spending, it can help to slow down the economy. Reduction in government expenditure will directly affect aggregate demand. For example, the government will cut subsidies, transfer payment including welfare programs, contract for public workers, or the number of government employees. It gives consumers less purchasing power. Next, increase in taxes will successfully reduce the impact of inflation in the economy. Increase in taxes will decrease individual income and reducing the amount of money available for consumers to use to purchase goods and services. Thus, it will lead to fall in price. That's all for fiscal policy.
Moving on to the second measures to control inflation, which is monetary measures, monetary policy. The monetary measures which are widely used to control inflation are bank rate policy. The bank rate policy is used as an important instrument to control inflation. The bank rate, also called as the central bank rediscount rate, is the rate at which the central bank buys or rediscounts the eligible bills of exchange and other commercial papers presented by commercial banks to build their reserves. Here, the central bank performs the function as lender of the last resort. The bank rate policy as a monetary measure to control inflation works in two ways. The first way is variable reserve ratio. The variable reserve ratio, also called as the cash reserve ratio, CRR, is a certain proportion of total demand, time deposits that the commercial banks are required to maintain in the form of cash reserves with the central bank. The cash reserve ratio is often determined and imposed by the central bank with a view to control the money supply. When the central bank raises the CRR, the lending capacity of the commercial banks reduces, due to which the flow of money from the banks to the public also decreases. Thus, it helps in controlling the rise in the price to the extent it is caused by the bank credit to the public. The second way is open market operations. The open market operations are characterized by the sale and purchase of government securities and bonds by the central bank. The central bank buys and sells the government securities and bonds to the public through the commercial banks. The government securities are sold via commercial banks, such that a certain amount of bank deposits is transferred to the central bank. As a result, the credit creation capacity of the commercial banks reduces. Thus, the flow of money from the banks to the public also get reduced. Right, that's all.
Now we go to direct or physical control. There are three things that are important in it. The first one is price pegging. The government will fix the floor and ceiling prices so that prices will not increase rapidly. As a result, the producer will not be able to increase prices according to their own desires. So, the problems of inflation will be reduced. The second one is encourage saving. The government increase the contribution to the Employees Provident Fund, EPF, or the bankers would be increasing the rates for saving. And the third one is price tagging. Every product in the market needs to label to prevent producers overcharging to consumers. I think that's all for direct or physical control.
For COVID-19 effect on business, first one is financial. So financial, for the top challenge, financial issues including cash flow, liquidity, delay in receivable and decline in revenue. So the intervention needed is initiative which reduce financial burdens or provide relief to loans and obligation are a priority. The second is for customer. Top challenge across large and SME company is small to medium enterprise company. Nearly half of the respondents have cities that a fall in demand is the key challenge. Over a quarter, 26% of large company cities changes in government policy as the most important assistance required, which include tax break, lower interest rate, and free waivers. For SMEs, relaxing MCO restriction is key. So the third is technology. Nearly a third of large and listed companies sees communication with customer and suppliers as a major challenge, while SME highlighted WFH connectivity is a key issue. The intervention needed is improved connectivity is the priority needed of business, followed by financial support in transitioning the technology-enabled process and systems. The fourth is supply chain. Large and listed companies cities delay in receiving supply as the main supply chain challenge, while SMEs noted delay in fulfillment and delivery as their major challenge. Most companies are requesting for a waiver of cross-border and service tax, along with additional credit facilities with banks. The last one is people. The 32% of large and listed companies have faced downtime in their operation, while 31% of SMEs have experienced delay in completing tasks and projects. Intervention needed. 38% of SME have prioritized application for wage subsidies, while large and listed companies have placed equal importance on staff unskilling, wage subsidies, and support in internet connectivity and working tools. Next. Okay, so this picture is to support the point that I said before. That's all for effect COVID-19 to business. Thank you.
Okay, next is COVID-19 effects on consumer. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown and the social distancing mandates have disrupted the consumer habits of buying. Consumers are learning to improvise and learn new habits. For example, consumers cannot go to the store to shop, so the store comes to home. While consumers go back to old habits, it is likely that they will be modified by new regulations and procedures in the way consumers shop and buy products. Next, next slide. Okay, this is some example of the effect of COVID-19 towards the consumer. They will be limiting food waste, shopping more health consciously, making more sustainable choices, shopping more cost consciously, shopping in closer neighborhood stores, only buying brands that they know and trust, doing fewer shops because they want to save their money, doing larger shops, and shopping more for the others. Next slide. This is also some of the effect that affect the consumer. People lives are digitalized under MCO with social media, e-commerce and streaming. The consumers will be use more social media to follow the news. They can use social media to follow the news and using messaging app and services such as WhatsApp, Discord to so they can get used to the new normal to communicate with other people and using e-commerce to purchase products. Online streaming such as Netflix to enjoy their free time by watching TV shows and movies and have food or groceries delivered to your home. Groceries such as fish, vegetables, they're more likely to order them online such as Tesco and many more, changing their investment or saving decisions. They will be spend a little amount of money because they want to save them for future use. That's all for the effect of COVID-19 towards consumer.
That's all for it from us. Thank you.